So our second speaker this afternoon is Malabou, who I'm very happy to introduce here in Zagreb. It's actually the case that I first read Katherine's work, The Future of Hegel, here in Zagreb, at a little cafe over by Studentsky Center, over a couple days. And I immediately knew that this was a philosopher whose work I would have to follow and continue to think in proximity with. I then finally had the chance to meet Katherine at UCLA 2 years ago, and I think that was the first time that we discussed the possibility of your coming to Zagreb to speak at an event like this. So it's gratifying now to have realized that possibility and to be able to welcome her to Malma and to Zagreb. Katherine Malabou is Professor of Modern European Philosophy at the Center for Research in Modern European Philosophy at Kingston University, and visiting professor of comparative literature at SUNY Buffalo. Her books include The Future of Hegel, Plasticity, Temporality, and Dialectic, 1996 in French, Plasticity at the Dusk of Writing, 2004, What Should We Do with Our Brain, also in 2004, The Heidegger Change, Le Change Heidegger, On the Fantastic in Philosophy, also 2004, and Les Nouveaux Blessés, de Freud à la Neurologie, not yet translated, but published in 2007. She's also the co-author with Adrian Johnston of Self and Emotional Life, Merging Philosophy, Psychoanalysis, and Neurobiology, which is forthcoming from Columbia University Press. And she is now preparing a new book on the political meaning of life in light of recent discoveries in the biological sciences. At the core of all this work, which is quite a considerable volume of work, ranging over an extraordinary range of references and theoretical frameworks, from German idealism, Derridean deconstruction, Heideggerian ontology, political economy, psychoanalysis, neurology, and biology, is the concept of plasticity, first elaborated by Malabou in The Future of Hegel. And I have an easy task in summarizing the import of this concept and some of its various uses in her work, since Malabou has already done so in Plasticity at the Dusk of Writing, which I think is not only an important book in synthesizing and extending the scope of Malabou's project, but also a very beautiful book in the spare lucidity of the conceptual autobiography that it offers. On the first page of this text, Malabou writes, "From Hegel to Heidegger, and then from Heidegger to Derrida, a grand formal adventure unfolded, a revisiting of the form that now prohibits us from confusing form purely and simply with presence, for form has secretly transformed itself. Today, form reveals its true colors. Form is plastic." Plasticity, etymologically, means both to model or to mold, the capacity both to give and receive form, but also to annihilate form, as for example in the case of plastic explosives. The annihilation of form is also a power of transformation, which is not only dialectical in its negativity, and thereby also resonates with the Heideggerian thinking of destruction and the Derridean operation of deconstruction. Malabou's theory of plasticity is thus a theory of form, of transformation, and of negativity. A theory not only of how form undoes and transforms itself, as being, as life, as writing, as thought, but also how philosophy undergoes its own immanent transformations through its encounter with the concept and the problem of plasticity. Malabou offers us a philosophical and hermeneutic method, then, which in Plasticity at the Dusk of Writing she calls plastic reading, a new but transformed structural approach which thinks the structure of philosophy of its historicity as a work of destruction, deconstruction, but also immanent transformation and metamorphosis. This concept, then, not only allows Malabou to deliver innovative and powerful readings of Hegel, of Heidegger, of Derrida, of the plasticity of the brain in the neurosciences, and the plasticity of life in the biological sciences, but also to begin the work of philosophy anew from its own groundless ground, a plasticity that we find transforming itself in the continual destruction, reconstruction, and rearticulation of her own thought, which I'm looking forward to finding rearticulated today. So help me in welcoming Katherine Malabou.
much, Nathan, and thank you all for inviting me here. And I'm very, very happy to meet for the first time with students and colleagues from here in Zagreb. Also, yes, I like this kind of situations when in another language than mine, I'm addressing people that I don't know. I find that very exciting. So, it's very, of course, difficult to speak after Adrian, after his so well-structured and elaborated talk. Mine is a bit more fuzzy because it's part of a work in progress. In this work, I aim at presenting a critique of the notions of biopower and biopolitics as fashioned, as we know, through Foucault's, but also Agamben's works. And in that work, I also take into account some of Derrida's last texts, mainly Faith and Knowledge, and also the last seminar on the Beast and the Sovereign, in which we can discover something like Derrida's personal approach to the problem of biopolitics. So it is in the context of this critique, which I will summarize here, that I will present this notion of epigenetics as not only a biological but also a philosophical concept. But it will take me a little detour to elaborate about epigenetics. Philosophers like Foucault, Agamben, or Derrida have strongly criticized, as we know, each in their own way, what we might call the metaphysics of life, as it can be found, for example, in phenomenology, metaphysics that draws a strict distinction between biological, material, empirical life on the one hand, and spiritual or intellectual life on the other, between body and flesh, between the objective body and the incarnated body, or even between the human and the animal. We know that Derrida has ceaselessly deconstructed such distinctions everywhere in his books, starting with the first one, Voice and Phenomenon, and pursuing more recently in On Touching, Jean-Luc Nancy, and as I said in his last seminar, The Beast and the Sovereign. We also know that Foucault also insisted very much upon the importance of material, empirical and biological life in many texts, but mostly in the latest one, The Courage of the Truth, The Government of Self, and others. And of course, Agamben also, particularly in Homo Sacer, with his distinction between bios and zoe, is also situating himself within this context of deconstructing vitalism or metaphysics of life. None of them confer to the term life a metaphysical or even an ontological value, and for these reasons, these authors criticize also vitalism, which is a way of affirming an immanence of the spiritual within the biological. So according to these philosophers, we should be able to conceive of a notion of life which deconstructs in advance any attempt at elaborating a philosophy of life. Then a theory of life, a philosophical approach to life, can only be a political articulation. It is not a question of defining life, of proposing a concept of life, but of understanding how and why to recall Foucault's famous declaration, in modern times, that is today, the living subject and the political subject are one and the same. Such a philosophical understanding of the subject, which is both biological and political, should be independent from any metaphysical or dogmatic claim. Still, and this is why I intend to demonstrate, there remains a border in these political approaches between what we may analyze as two notions of life, and even between two lives, the biological life and what I will call here the symbolic life. My claim here is that under the name of biopolitics, a new relationship between the biological and the symbolic is hiding itself. There is something like a hinge between these two lives, in these contemporary discourses, a hinge that is both a junction and a split within two concepts of life. The persistence of such a hinge is what reintroduces, according to me, a kind of vitalism within the political approach to life. So, first of all, I will talk about this hinge between the biological and the symbolic within the contemporary philosophical discourse, and then I will try to see how we can deconstruct, through the notion of epigenetics as an example, how we can try to deconstruct the persistence or the remnants of this hinge. What is symbolic? What do I mean by symbolic life? Symbolic is a difficult term, and in order to clarify this concept, I will propose immediately to distinguish between two meanings of the term, a narrow one and an enlarged one. A symbol, in the narrow sense, can be defined as something such as an object, picture, written word, sound, or particular mark that represents something else by association, resemblance, or convention. Symbolism, in this sense, designates the device through which different entities can be symbolized, either by object, picture, or linguistic images. So this is the narrow sense. A symbol is a representation of. But there is another meaning, and we'll see that both are functioning in the theories I was talking about. The second meaning of the symbolic, we may consider that the second meaning has been brought to light in a very clear way by Lévi-Strauss in his introduction to the work of Marcel Mauss. The symbolic, in his Lévi-Straussian acception, does not designate a symbol production, as in sense one, but an economy. The symbolic is an economy, a certain economy or arrangement which designates the conditions of possibility of meaning in general. The symbolic economy is the conditions of possibility for science in general. It is this structural spacing that renders meaning possible. This economy has to do, according to Lévi-Strauss, with the existence of what he calls the floating signifier. Abel, I will quote from Lévi-Strauss a little bit. What is a floating signifier? It is something which is, I quote, able to represent an undetermined quantity of signification, in itself void of meaning, and thus apt to receive any meaning. So it is a void in language. It is an empty space. The floating signifier is a signifier with a vague, highly variable, unspecifiable, or non-existent signifier. As such, the floating signifier may, I quote Lévi-Strauss again, mean different things to different people. They may stand for many or even any signifier. They may mean whatever their interpreters want them to mean. Such a floating signifier is said to possess, as Lévi-Strauss puts it, a value zero. And this value zero is what, according to Lévi-Strauss, maintains the correspondence between signifiers and signified. Without this originary void in language, without this originary blank, we wouldn't be able to speak and to understand each other. So here, as we see, the symbol, according to its first meaning, is depending upon the symbolic economy, meaning two. The symbolic, understood as an economy, means this empty space that gives language its mobility. It is because our language is full of these little nonsensical words, like Lévi-Strauss gives example, how manna in the cultures he analyzes, or all the ones quoted from Lewis Carroll by Deleuze. Without these little non-meaning words,